April 17th, 1943, Lyon, France. The rain had stopped only an hour ago, leaving the cobblestones slick and shining under the pale dawn light. The city was quiet, too quiet for a Saturday morning. No market chatter, no trams clattering down the Rue de Marseille. Only the rhythmic clicking of a bicycle chain echoed through the narrow back streets. Lucy Aubrac pedaled slowly, her worn wool coat buttoned to the neck, a wicker basket balanced neatly on the handlebars. A few sprigs of parsley poked out from a folded newspaper, the perfect disguise for what lay beneath. 2 hand-drawn maps, a coded message, and a small Colt pistol wrapped in a handkerchief. To anyone watching, she was just another French housewife, running errands before the curfew lifted. To the Gestapo, she was invisible. But to the French resistance, she was the schoolteacher who fooled them all. She turned onto Rue des Martyrs, glancing at her reflection in a shop window. Behind her, a German truck rumbled past, gray smoke curling from its exhaust. The soldiers inside laughed, their boots hanging from the tailgate. Lucy kept her eyes forward. She'd memorized every patrol route in this part of the city. This morning, she wasn't just delivering messages. She was bait. The mission had been whispered in a smoke-filled cellar 2 nights earlier. Captain Serge Ravenel, her contact in the MER, Mouvements Unis de la Résistance, had pointed to a crude map on the table. Convoy leaves the depot at 0600. 3 trucks, fuel, munitions, and food supplies. If we intercept them near Écully, we can cripple their advance north. He paused, his gaze falling on Lucy. But someone has to lure them out of the city first. We need eyes. Someone they'd never suspect. Ah. Lucy had smiled, one hand resting lightly on her belly. A pregnant woman on a bicycle? They'll offer to carry my groceries before they search me. Now, as the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, she approached the bridge over the Saône. Her pulse quickened. Beneath the bridge, hidden among the shadows, 2 men waited with rifles wrapped in burlap. Resistance fighters. Her fighters. She coasted to a stop at the bridge's midpoint, pretending to adjust her front wheel. Through the thin veil of fog, she saw movement. 3 gray trucks in the distance, heading straight toward her. Perfect timing. She reached into her basket and pulled out a small handkerchief embroidered with faded blue flowers. To anyone else, it was nothing. But to those watching from below, it was the signal. Lucy tied it carefully to her bicycle handle, her fingers steady despite the thudding in her chest. The convoy drew closer, the growl of engines filling the air. A sergeant riding shotgun leaned out, barking orders in German. Lucy forced herself to look flustered, stepping aside, as if trying to fix her chain. One of the soldiers whistled as they passed. Another laughed. And then, just as the first truck crossed the midpoint of the bridge, a sharp whistle cut through the air. 2 explosions shattered the morning calm. The first tore through the lead truck's tires, sending it lurching sideways. The second, placed expertly beneath the stone arch, blew a hole through the bridge rail. German soldiers screamed, ducking for cover as smoke and dust swallowed the convoy. Lucy didn't move. Her bicycle lay beside her. Overturned, the parsley scattered across the cobblestones. Through the chaos, she could see the second truck struggling to reverse. Another explosion, this time from the embankment, lit up the road. The resistance fighters emerged from the fog, rifles snapping like firecrackers. One by one, the Germans dropped their weapons. The third truck tried to flee, but was blocked by a toppled cart. Within minutes, it was over. Lucy stood, brushing the dust from her coat. Her basket was gone, but the mission was complete. She picked up her bicycle and began to walk, passing stunned German prisoners on their knees. One of the fighters called out, "Madame Aubrac, you did it." Lucy turned her head slightly, her expression calm, almost motherly. "We all did," she said softly. Then she climbed onto her bicycle, pedaled through the smoke, and disappeared into the mist of Lyon's awakening streets. Behind her, the bridge burned. Ahead of her, France still waited to be free. By the time Lucy reached the edge of the city, the acrid scent of burning fuel had faded, replaced by the wet sweetness of morning earth and lilac hedges. Her bicycle chain rattled as she coasted down a dirt path, past fields glistening with dew. She knew every turn, every pothole. The Resistance's safe house lay just beyond the tree line. A modest farmhouse belonging to a retired schoolmaster who kept chickens and secrets with equal devotion. She dismounted, leaned her bicycle against a wooden fence, and tapped twice on the door. Then once more, after a pause. The old code. Inside, a man in his 50s with a gray mustache and heavy spectacles opened the door. He smiled faintly. "Madame Aubrac, you've been busy." Lucy stepped inside, shaking off the chill. "They'll be combing the city by noon," she said. "We have maybe 4 hours before they set up checkpoints." From the corner, another voice answered. A young courier named Francois, barely 20, his uniform stolen from a German depot. "You really did it? They say 3 trucks were taken, supplies intact." Lucy sat down at the wooden table, pulling off her gloves. 2 trucks, she corrected him. The third was hit too hard to recover. But the bridge, it'll take them weeks to repair. Francois whistled. "You realize what this means? They'll be furious. They'll think it was a British sabotage team." Lucy allowed herself a thin smile. Let them think that. For a brief moment, silence filled the room. Just the ticking of a clock and the clucking of hens outside. Then she reached into her coat pocket and drew out a folded scrap of paper. "I have something else," she said. "Intercepted orders." The convoy was carrying not just fuel. There were communication documents headed for the Gestapo office in Dijon. If we can decode them, we might find out who's collaborating. The old schoolmaster's brow furrowed. "You took these from the convoy?" "I took them," she said simply, "before the trucks stopped burning." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You're a schoolteacher, a wife, and now a spy with nerves of steel." Lucy looked up at him, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm a mother," she said, "and mothers do what they must." By midday, the Gestapo had indeed flooded Lyon. Sirens wailed through the narrow streets. Soldiers kicked in doors, dragged men from their shops, shouted questions no one dared answer. Flyers went up, bearing sketches of Lucy Bernard, her maiden name, and a description. Female, early 30s, slim, possibly pregnant, dangerous. In the central office on Rue du Guesclin, Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, stood at his desk, tapping his riding crop against a file. "A pregnant woman," he muttered. "You expect me to believe a housewife organized this?" An officer swallowed hard. "Sir, witnesses saw her near the bridge. She escaped on a bicycle." Barbie's lip curled. "Find her. Search every school, every house in Croix-Rousse. If she's carrying a child, she won't get far." But he didn't know Lucy Aubrac. That afternoon, she walked straight past a German checkpoint, dressed in a nurse's uniform, a Red Cross armband on her sleeve. Her bicycle was gone, hidden in the fields, replaced with a small satchel of medical supplies. The soldier who waved her through barely looked up. By the time Barbie's men raided the farmhouse that evening, it was empty. Only the scent of burnt paper remained in the hearth. Every trace of the intercepted orders turned to ash. Night fell again over Lyon. From a window overlooking the city, Lucy watched the glow of searchlights sweep across rooftops. Her husband, Raymond Aubrac, another resistance leader, stood beside her. "They'll never stop, Lucy," he said. "They'll hunt you until this war ends." She turned to him, eyes steady. "Then we make sure it ends faster." Below, the streets were silent again. Somewhere in the darkness, a bicycle waited, its chain oiled, its tires patched, ready for another ride into danger. Lucy exhaled, the ghost of a smile crossing her face. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "we ride again." April 18th, 1943. Road D486, outskirts of Écully, just before dawn. Dawn here was a thin, reluctant thing, a pale smear behind treetops. Birds stunned into silence. The road was a single ribbon of damp blacktop, cutting through fields of waist-high wheat. On the crest of a shallow rise, 3 camouflaged figures huddled in the ditch, faces streaked with soot and grease, rifles braced on knees. Their breath hung in the cold air like steam. Captain Serge Ravenel checked his watch, then tightened the strap on his webbing. Beside him, Lieutenant Marcel Momo Guibert adjusted the sling on his Sten submachine gun. The barrel had been oiled with the same careful devotion he used on his father's bicycle chain. A tin of British No. 36 Mills grenades lay within easy reach. Ravenel's eyes were stone. "They should be on the hour," he whispered. 3 trucks, Opel Blitzes, 2 escort cars. He flicked a glance toward a hedgerow, where a skinny silhouette rode slowly into position. Lucy Aubrac, though tonight she wore a widow's shawl and an old nurse's cap to hide the curve of her belly. Her bicycle had the wicker basket replaced with a rusted milk crate. Within it, a battered thermos and a satchel of folded messages. The bike's front lamp had been removed and hidden. No risk of giving away a silhouette. They had set the wire the night before. 2 lines of thin steel, anchored to iron spikes and connected to a makeshift trip. A loop of wire tied to a length of fuse. The explosive charge was not plastic demolition. It was improvised. A cache of dynamite sticks wrapped in canvas and crude detonators smuggled in from a munitions raid. The resistance was never flush with perfect tools. Lucy sat on her bicycle at the edge of the road, pretending to study a crumpled shopping list. Beyond her, the tarmac curved gently. Perfect kill zone. She could see the hulking shapes of the convoy in the distance. Headlights like two sleepy moons, silhouettes of men and metal. An Oberleutnant in an escort car would be scanning for civilians. He had no reason to suspect a pale-faced schoolteacher with a bicycle and a basket of herbs. Ravenel tapped twice on the butt of his rifle, the signal. From the ditch, Francois, the young courier, crawled forward, placing a small mirror in the grass to reflect the convoy's light when it came. Every movement was measured, silent, discipline born of hunger and fear and necessity. They had rehearsed this on moonless nights, mapped the road's gravel, learned the exact point where a truck's suspension would dip. The first truck crossed the rise, its driver singing in German, breath misting in the cold. Lucy shifted her weight, the chain clicking softly. The truck's rear was stacked with wooden crates, stamped with German eagles and crude lettering. Benzin. The Sten's metal taste warmed Momo's palms. He counted his breaths. 1, 2, 3, until the truck was directly opposite Lucy's basket. She fumbled with the handkerchief, the same blue-flowered cloth she had tied to the bridge. It was a signal to the men. Now, the wire loop caught under a wheel. A flash of sparks ran along the fuse. For a heartbeat, time stretched. A horsefly's wing. A child's shout. The smell of oil. Then the charge detonated. The first explosion lifted the truck like a rag doll. Wood splintered. Crates flew in a shower of splinters. The second and third blows followed in brutal, rehearsed cadence. A sequence of thunder that turned road into chaos. The escort car swerved wildly, guns barking, but the hedgerows had their own fighters. A burst of submachine gun fire shredded the air. German voices rose to terrified yells. And Oberfeldwebel threw himself from the lead cab, rifle clattering. He fumbled with his Mauser, hands shaking. Ravenel rose from his cover, face a pale mask, and fired a single, aimed burst. The Oberfeldwebel sagged, a gray blossom of dust rising from his collar. Men who had been laughing in Lyon were now scrambling, a choreography of fear, firing, falling, surrendering. 2 trucks burned. Their gasoline fed a black, acrid plume that stained the morning. The third attempted to back away, but struck the toppled remains of a cart the resistance had placed as a roadblock. Its driver scrambled out, hands raised. Francois bounded forward, seizing a map that had fallen from the cab, his fingers numb. He looked at the stamped papers, dispatches, schedules, the very orders Lucy had promised to intercept. He could see names, pickets in Dijon, collaborators in the Rhône, a thread that could be pulled. Lucy did not celebrate. She crouched beside her bicycle, cupped her hands around a thermos, and offered coffee to a trembling peasant man whose cart had been knocked into the ditch. The man sobbed, overwhelmed by the suddenness of it all. The roar, the smoke, the pile of German boots spilling into the mud. Lucy's voice was steady as she spoke to him in the local To any passerby, she was a woman outraged and frightened. To her men, she was their anchor. The resistance rounded up prisoners. They stripped the lead truck for documents, furiously copying orders into notebooks by the light of a stolen carbide lamp. Among the captured men was a Feldwebel with a bright iron cross, who spat curses and tried to hide his face. Ravenel ordered silence. Search them. No executions, he said, voice low. Even in triumph, the moral lines were narrow. The resistance needed prisoners alive for interrogation, for intelligence leverage. By mid-morning, the road was a tableau. Blackened wheel ruts, charred crates, Germans bound with scarves, the quiet rhythm of soldiers turned prisoners, now guarded by villagers. Lucy sat on the bank, hands clasped at her belly, as Francois unfolded a dispatch and read name. From the hill, someone shouted a warning. A column of trucks miles away, alerted. The moment of victory turned fragile. Ravenel's jaw tightened. We move, he said, now. Destroy what we cannot take. They burned the remaining crates, smashed radios, and set false trails into the woods. As they melted back into hedgerows and the small habitual paths of the countryside, Lucy mounted her bicycle and pedaled away like any other woman fleeing market hour. Hair pinned, shawl secure, a pocket full of torn, priceless documents. Behind them, the road held the ghosts of explosions and the iron taste of a day that would be told and retold. Ahead, the names in the dispatches promised more webs to unravel. For Lucy Obrock, a pregnant schoolteacher who had ridden a bicycle into the jaws of an enemy convoy, the war had moved from whispered plans to irreversible action. April 19th, 1943. Lyon, France. Smoke from the Écully ambush still drifted across the countryside, like a warning flag, when the Gestapo began their sweep. Trucks rolled through the narrow arteries of Lyon, iron rims thundering on cobblestone, dogs barking as soldiers pounded on doors. Posters bearing sketches of resistance suspects appeared overnight. And though few citizens dared to linger near them, everyone knew the woman on those sheets. The one with dark eyes, the faint smile, the bicycle. Lucy Obrock had become a ghost story the Germans told themselves to explain humiliation. By dawn, she was already underground again. The resistance safe house on Rue des Fosses had been cleared out. Blackboards erased, pamphlets burned. Lucy moved through the back alleys in a borrowed coat, her hair hidden beneath a kerchief, a basket on her arm once again. She crossed herself as she passed the church of Saint-Nizier, not for piety, but for performance. The Gestapo had informants in every quarter, and sometimes the smallest show of faith bought suspicion's mercy. Inside the cellar beneath a bakery, Lucy met with Captain Ravenel and her husband, Raymond. The room smelled of yeast and kerosene. The low ceiling dripped condensation onto a table, cluttered with radio parts and ration tins. A single light bulb flickered overhead. Ravenel was bent over a map, his voice low but urgent. The documents from Écully confirm the Dijon office has a list of collaborators and planned deportations. They're moving trains north next week. If we can intercept them before they reach Caluire, we can free at least a dozen political prisoners. Lucy's eyes narrowed. Including Jean Moulin? Raymond nodded gravely. If the information is accurate. Jean Moulin, the man tasked by de Gaulle himself to unite the resistance. His name was a prayer and a secret. If captured, the entire underground would unravel. Ravenel leaned back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The problem is Klaus Barbie. He's already begun interrogations. He'll use the Écully ambush as justification to arrest half the district. Lucy spoke without hesitation. Then we use his anger against him." The men looked up. "We leak false intelligence," she continued. "We'll plant it on a courier. Say, a list of targets for sabotage in Dijon. Barbie will divert his men to hunt phantoms while we move the prisoners. I'll take it to the courier myself." Ravenel shook his head. "No, Lucy. You're already on every list they have. If they catch you, they won't." Her tone ended the discussion. That night, the streets shimmered under the orange wash of blackout lamps. Lucy rode again, her bicycle tires whispering over the stones. The false dispatch folded inside a loaf of bread. In her pocket, she carried a forged ration card and a small vial of morphine. A last resort if captured. She passed the old silk warehouses near Quarus, where windows were boarded and German guards smoked at corners. The smell of roast chestnuts from a nearby cart mingled with diesel fumes. A radio somewhere in the distance played a scratchy waltz. French voices forced to pretend at normalcy. At a checkpoint, a sentry raised a hand. "Papieren bitte." Lucy smiled, her hand trembling just enough to look convincing. "Of course, officer," she said in careful German, fishing for her papers. "I'm a nurse from St. Joseph Hospital. I've been tending refugees." The soldier examined the documents under the lamplight, eyes darting to her stomach. He frowned, then softened. "You should not be traveling so late. Dangerous times, madame." Lucy offered a tired smile. "War makes everyone travel too late." He handed the papers back and waved her on. Only when she turned the corner did she allow herself to breathe again. By midnight, she reached the outskirts of Dijon. The courier, a wiry man in a long coat, waited by the mile marker near an abandoned rail siding. They exchanged only 2 words. "For France," he said. "For freedom," she replied. He took the bread, slung it into his satchel, and disappeared into the dark. Lucy lingered a moment, listening. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle cried out, long, mournful, like a warning from another world. She turned her bicycle toward Lyon, back toward the heart of danger. But Klaus Barbie was not fooled for long. 2 days later, a patrol intercepted the courier. The false dispatch led them in circles, but they found the baker's wrapping and the faint imprint of Lucy's handwriting on a note hidden inside. Barbie's men raided Lyon with renewed fury. They arrested 20 suspected resistance members in one morning, including a young radio operator who had once shared a safe house with Lucy. Within hours, the operator was dead. His last word, under torture, a single name, Obrak. By the evening of April 21st, the Gestapo had set its snare. They knew where Raymond would be. A secret meeting planned in Caluire-Equerre. And this time, Lucy would walk straight into their trap, not as the hunter, but the bait. June 21st, 1943. Caluire-Equerre, outskirts of Lyon. Summer heat pressed against the hills like a damp hand, turning the air thick with dust and lilac pollen. The meeting place was an old physician's house overlooking the Saône. Quiet, respectable, and Lucy feared, compromised. She had warned Raymond not to go. "Something's wrong," she'd whispered the night before, when they sat in a dim apartment with blackout curtains drawn. Too many new faces, too many messages relayed through intermediaries. But Raymond Obrock, engineer, resistance leader, husband and father-to-be, had shaken his head. We can't postpone, Lucy. Moulin himself might be there. If I don't show, they'll think I've lost nerve. Lucy had held his face between her hands, memorizing the lines of worry and resolve. Promise me, she'd said. If anything goes wrong, you'll find me. He'd smiled, weary, but sure. If anything goes wrong, you'll find me first. Now, as the clock struck 2 that afternoon, the streets of Cauir lay in deceptive calm. A gardener trimmed hedges near the physician's front gate. A black Citroën sedan idled on the corner, its occupants reading newspapers, hats low. And across the street, a woman on a bicycle lingered by a fruit stall, pretending to inspect cherries. Lucy's heart hammered so violently, she feared the vendor might hear it. She wasn't supposed to be here. The men had insisted she stay in Lyon, but instinct had drawn her, the same instinct that had saved her life before. She glanced at the Citroën again. The men inside weren't reading. Their gloved hands rested too carefully on their laps. Then, without warning, the door to the physician's house burst open. German voices, boots thudding, shouts. Lucy froze as Gestapo agents poured into the street, dragging men in plain clothes. She recognized one immediately. Moulin, beaten but defiant. And then Raymond, his face bloodied, his glasses gone, still shouting as they struck him across the head. Raymond. The word tore from her throat before she could stop it. A soldier turned, eyes narrowing. She ducked behind the stall, snatching her bicycle by instinct. The fruit vendor grabbed her arm in panic. Madame. No, but Lucy was at the bridge. She dismounted, breath ragged. The resistance safe house was gone. The network was bleeding. Her husband was in Gestapo hands, and Klaus Barbie had his prize. Lucy leaned against the railing, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. Around her, the city buzzed with an indifferent hum. Trams, church bells, the murmurs of citizens pretending not to notice arrests happening in daylight. She stayed there for a long moment, her bicycle at her side, fumes, until the crying stopped. Then she straightened, pushed the hair from her eyes, and whispered to herself, "He said I'd find him first." July 1943, Montluc Prison. The prison squatted like a scar on the city's eastern edge. High walls, barbed wire, the stink of damp and despair. Inside, Raymond Obrock sat in a cell with 9 others, all condemned men. He'd been beaten, but not broken. Every night, he whispered his wife's name to stay sane. And outside those walls, Lucy was already planning his escape. She posed as a social worker, as a nurse, as a relative. Any role that might get her inside the Gestapo's bureaucratic labyrinth. She bribed guards with ration coupons, forged signatures, memorized patrol schedules. For weeks, she visited offices, her belly now visibly round, her eyes burning with quiet fury. At one appointment, she faced a German administrator directly. "My husband," she said, voice trembling with feigned innocence, "is being held by mistake. He's not a criminal. He's an engineer. We have a child on the way." The officer sighed. "Madame, your husband is an enemy of the Reich." Lucy's lips quivered. "Then so am I." She left before he could respond. That night, in another cellar meeting, she outlined her plan. Impossible, reckless, perfect. "We'll intercept the transport," she said. "The one taking prisoners from Montluc to the Gestapo headquarters. We'll disguise as the escort." Ravenel stared at her. "You're talking about attacking a guarded convoy inside Lyon itself." Lucy nodded. "Then it's time the Germans learned how dangerous a housewife can be." Her hands didn't shake when she said it. August 21st, 1943. A gray staff car rolled through the streets near Avenue Berthelot. Inside, prisoners sat chained, their faces pale in the morning light. Among them was Raymond. 2 guards rode in the front seat, another in the back with a rifle across his knees. A motorcycle approached from behind. A courier, waving papers, shouting in French that the route had changed. The driver hesitated. That moment of confusion was all they needed. The courier drew a pistol and fired. Tires screamed. The back door burst open. Resistance fighters emerged from every direction. Workers, students, even one dressed as a priest. In the chaos, Raymond stumbled free, dazed, eyes scanning wildly, until he saw her. Lucy, standing by her bicycle. She shouted, "Raymond, vite!" He ran. Bullets cracked against walls as she shoved her bicycle aside and grabbed his arm. Together, they vanished into the warren of side streets, pursued by shouting Germans. When they finally reached the fields beyond Lyon, Raymond collapsed in the grass, gasping. Lucy knelt beside him, pressing his hand to her stomach. "She's still kicking," she said with a trembling smile. "You're not the only one I had to save." He laughed, hoarse, disbelieving, alive. That night, the city whispered her name again. Not as a rumor, not as a ghost, but as a legend. Lucy Aubrac, the woman who outwitted the butcher of Lyon, who rode a bicycle through war and smoke and brought her husband back from hell. And somewhere in the darkness, the faint clatter of bicycle spokes echoed once more, a sound the Nazis would never forget.